The dwarves indeed prove tough and hard to tame. They ill endure the domination of others, and the thoughts of their hearts are hard to fathom, nor can they be turned to shadows. They used their rings only for the getting of wealth, but wrath and an overmastering greed of gold were kindled in their hearts, of which evil enough after came to the prophet of Sauron. Hey everyone, Yoistin here, and I hope you all are doing well, wherever you are in Middle-earth. Today we are talking about why the dwarves are just so powerful in Tolkien's world, indomitable and strong, and how they were beyond the reach of corruption from their rings of power. My friends, thank you all for joining me today. Let's begin our tale. Aule, he who shaped and crafted much of the physical geography of the world, made the dwarves, even without the flame imperishable at first, during the years of the trees. Now this actually means a lot of things. The dwarves were designed before the forms of elves and men were known to the Valar, at least their forms that were granted beyond the vision of Arda that they were given in the beginning, before the awakening of the children. So Aule designed the dwarves without a template or an exemplar, imagining what they would roughly look like and making the dwarves similar in kind. Another point too is that Aule could not have known that Eru was going to give dwarves true life, so they were also designed with the intention to be beings without free will, at least to some degree. He made these beings in impatience, as he was waiting for the children of Iluvatar to come, and in a similar sort of way to Melkor, wanting to have his own folk, but not to rule, to take pride in. This is all to say that Aule, from his point of view, made them hardy, like any of his crafts, and loyal to a purpose, since they were literally brothers and sisters of mountains and valleys in a certain way of thinking. Since they were crafts of Aule, and the mountains and valleys were as well, at least their substances were, again, they were kin in pretty much every way. Aule made them in the way that he knew how to craft things, such as how he molded the earth, meaning tough, stone-like, hardy in every sense of the word. And again, without that template to necessarily build them in the likeness of, he gave it his best approximation. Yet the flaws or vices that were perhaps present in Aule himself were also transferred over. Just as Melkor took unto his mockeries and worst twisted beings great sins of wrath, envy, a will to power and tyranny and so forth, a will to destruction, Aule was also alike to Melkor more than any other Vala, which we see with the servants of Aule that joined Melkor as well, Sauron and Saruman. And we can tell that the dwarves had a great deal of problems for themselves to deal with too, likely rooted in Aule. Of course, men, elves, and hobbits were beset with their own issues, but even though the dwarves who were crafted by the one who literally shaped the substances of Arda, meaning they had great strength, that came with some drawbacks too. They were too strong, strong-headed, stubborn as stone, and even susceptible to greed over the metals and very stones of the earth itself, or the great crafts that they envied. Yet even as they were made, Aule was certainly aware of Melkor and his evils. He had been subjected to them before, with the near domination of Arda in the Elder Days. So he made the dwarves hardy to withstand this darkness of Melkor, again, not necessarily knowing that they would go out and have to face it in their own free will when they were made. All of this does raise the question of what Aule's plans were with sending the dwarves into Middle-earth. If they had not been given free will and true life, perhaps they would have simply been his assistants or something. There's also something to be said about the strength in the culture, customs, and destinies behind the dwarves of Middle-earth, such as in their close-knit clans and ability to unify and unite, even between the 7 different clans as we see during the War of the Dwarves and Orcs. We also see that, again, they weren't originally made like men and elves. They were adopted by Iluvatar. They were not a part of his original destiny or vision for Middle-earth, even if perhaps they were in Eru's mind, in that he perhaps knew all things. Yet they were adopted into this vision for Middle-earth, and they would make fate for themselves, perhaps not as predestined or predetermined as it was for men or elves. And this is where the dwarves had to really determine their own culture and their own destiny. And there certainly is something to be said about whatever magic of craft that Aule had going into the dwarves, with dwarven weapons and armor and other artifacts being some of the most powerful materials in the known world in Middle-earth, just naturally. and how most, if not all, of their blacksmiths were at least renowned in some fashion or another. That is a different kind of power, and surely they get that from Aule himself. With all of this in mind, it's truly no wonder why the dwarves were so powerful. They were creations of Aule. They were literally siblings of mountains and stone and other substances of the world. And so attempting to corrupt one with even a ring of power seems foolhardy. And for the most part, it actually was. These rings made them lust for greater wealth and so forth, still bringing forth their greed, which would see them push towards downfall and evil in some ways, as we see with Moria at least. So Sauron still got something out of it, but he did not nearly get as much from these rings with the dwarves as he had wished, for they were indomitable in form and spirit, and would not become creatures like Nazgul. If a dwarf was loyal, and most honestly were, they would be as a rock to the side of a mountain, hard to move, and even more challenging yet to break. This offers contrast between them and most other beings in Middle-earth who had not that resilience and endurance of stone, and were perhaps at more times fickle and less reliable, depending on the individual and the situation at hand, of course. And so, my friends, we come to the end of our tale on why were the dwarves so powerful. From this tale, we see the motifs of the natural world that we should, ourselves, learn to endure like stone, and hold true and loyal to those we call kin and friends, such as the dwarves did. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this smaller Middle-earth explained video. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and share this with a friend. It is interesting to look at what Aule's mindset must have been during the creation of his people, what his original goals with them were, and even if his design of the dwarves influenced how men and elves, even hobbits, would likely appear later on, if that influenced Eru at all. If you'd like to support the channel, please consider getting some candles for our friends Mythologie Candles, or order some Wedded or United Cutlery, Lord of the Rings swords, statues, and other replicas from Castle Kon, who does international shipping, and use the code WEST at checkout, and please check out our merch. Join our memberships and Patreon for access to our Discord and our monthly podcast, a new episode of which drops soon. Thanks to our Valar tier patrons and YouTube members, Ed Patterson, ComicNut64, Brian Hunley, Peter Sheppard, John Hume, Rhys Jenkins, Arthur Merlin, Theodore, Andrew Carlisle, and Zoomi. Please subscribe and hit that bell button to join the Men of the West and all of the free peoples today, and I'll see you all again next week with a video on what happened to the Dark Elves. Also, a week from today, December 29th, will be the channel's 10th birthday, so we'll do a charity live stream for it, discussing this journey that we've all been on together, and what I've learned as a Lord of the Rings YouTuber after 10 years. My friends, thank you all so much for joining me on this adventure. Until our next ones.